We are having so much fun finding cool stuff and linking it up to people who really love and understand antiques and vintage and collectibles, and we're going to show you how that's going right now. Because this is the what sold on eBay for last month, and last month was December, but we didn't actually get this listing out until December 31st. So this is not based on some hyped up inflated Christmas sales. These are actual sales in the new year. And I've got to tell you, eBay has got to solve a problem. So this was the first of the Star Wars figures, and this one was no problem. Went out, it got 28 bids, it sold for $89. It sold with a couple of other pieces to one person who is a viewer who got 3 or 4 things, and I instructed them, as I will anyone else who bids, don't pay that invoice until I can do combined shipping for you, and that way you get a little better deal. The Lando Calrissian figure was one of 3 Star Wars figures I put on to see out of major characters in the film which one would sell for the most. So let's take a look and see how that did. Here was number 2. This one went for $165.50. This is R2-D2, and this was when they had added the sensor scope, that little thing coming out of its noggin there. And you can tell here, looking at this, I'll highlight it so you can see, this is the original blister pack, and it has not been taken off and re-glued. That's very important to look for. I had one of about 30 that I sold come back to me because someone had taken it out, put the wrong weapon in, and re-glued it. So that was a lesson that I had to learn. The other thing is that they are starting to make copies of the original backs that had only 20 characters or fewer on them in order to make the pieces look older than they are. So definitely look closely with a magnifying glass if you buy a piece like this or are contemplating one. If you see a really early low number back with a lot fewer characters than this, beware that there are some reproductions of those backs being put on newer items. But that is not the thing that annoyed me with these with eBay. What really got me about this, we sold this for $395, but that was not the original sold price. The original sold price was a couple $100 higher because at the last minute, someone sniped the bid who had 1 feedback with a brand new account. This is the 3rd time in 3 months that I have gotten burned because eBay let somebody with practically no feedback spike the bid at the last minute and not pay. eBay, you've got to fix this problem. You're going to turn off people who are selling better quality items if they keep getting burned on their stuff like this. And then you have to put it back in the marketplace, and then everyone who missed out on the bid has already decided, well, that was too much because I wouldn't bid that much, and then you have to start all over again. It is not a good practice, and it is so easy to solve. All eBay needs to do is say, if you have feedback less than some certain number, like 50 or 100 transactions, so that we know you're going to come through, you have to have a card on file, and you will be charged immediately for the item. You will not have the option to not pay. Instead, what eBay does is they wait 4 days, and then they send you a note saying, we've successfully canceled the transaction for you, like they're doing you a favor. Really makes me mad. Fortunately, the person who was the backup bidder was similarly annoyed and sent me a message right after saying, I can't believe I was beaten out by somebody with 1 feedback. And I said, well, stay tuned because the likelihood is that they will not pay and eBay will cancel it and then I will sell it to you. So I sold it to them after not getting paid by the person who won the bid for a fair price that was less than the price that it had gotten bid up to because that wasn't a real bid. But if you go to eBay, it will show the higher amount as the actual completed sale, which is really difficult for people who are trying to price their items and looking at eBay completed sales and thinking that they're real. But it's not real if eBay doesn't collect the money and give it to you. So eBay, do something about this. This is starting to get ridiculous. However, the rest of the transactions went great. And we'll show those now. Every month we pick out 20 items that we think are interesting for various reasons. Some are expensive, some are not. They might have a good story. It might just be something we've never gotten to share with everybody before. We do it thanks to our Level 2 and Level 3 members. Those folks get early access, whether they're a Level 2 or 3 member here or on Patreon. It all works the same. And we're very grateful for their added contributions because it allows us to release this video eventually to everyone. Some of them sell Buy It Now. And that was the case of this one. It went for 1 bid on Buy It Now for $19. And it is a great little souvenir piece from the Knowles plant. They did this great Yorktown shape in the 1930s. Look at that fantastic poker hand there. 4 aces and the joker. Can't do better than that. If I had a whole set of these, I'd be happy too. I have a set of the coasters in the maroon and blue, but if I found a bunch more of these, I'd probably add them to it. This next piece, well, I didn't make a ton of money on this. It only sold for a few dollars more than I paid for it. I pretty much broke even, but I was just glad to put it out there because Zeno's great-grandfather actually ran the DX station in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, which is still there as a historic building, and they say they've gotten a grant for it, and it's going to be renovated and turned into a barbecue restaurant of all things. Went for $39 on one bid, and I just thought it was the neatest piece. They were way ahead of their time. They put lubricants in their fuel back in the early 30s and made their name, and now it's all part of Sunoco, so you don't see DX anymore. This was really fun. This was to Steve. I'm sure Gogi Grant probably enjoyed meeting Steve, and then she realized that, oh, we're on a very long train from Seattle to Chicago. I'm going to be with this person a lot. So hopefully Steve was a good guy and a good fan and not some sort of a stalker, because that's like a 4.5-day trip on the train. But it was written on the back of the Great Northern pad of paper. And it went for $14.99 on a buy it now on one bid. Gogi Grant is somebody who we only really know for 1 or 2 songs now, but she actually was involved with a lot of orchestra. She sang on a lot of other people's records. She was in the music business for quite a while. Vancouver Grizzlies, well, this is the unused original issue NBA cap, and it went, as I suspected, to a fan in Memphis, where the Grizzlies now reside and have been much more successful than they were in Vancouver. Memphis was always a basketball town, always wanted a professional sport of some sort, and has really coalesced around basketball in a way that Vancouver just didn't. I don't think you can really push basketball that hard in a hockey market. So the Grizzlies are no more in Vancouver, but the memories of them linger on in Memphis. This piece is marked Zaneware, as you see here. That's the transition they went to when they changed their mark in the 1920s. This was used from 1921 to 1926. And the design, Moss Aztec, so it looks like it's old. It's actually always had that greening. It was made that way. And this was a Frank Farrell idea. He did all the floral lines for Roseville later. He tried to get Weller Pottery when he worked for them. He took his design like this to them, and they said, oh, that'll never sell. So he went across the street and worked for someone else, and then worked for Roseville. And by the late 1940s, Roseville's success had pretty much put Weller out of business. So listen to your employees if they have a good idea. Sometimes it's worth giving it a shot. 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, $36 on 4 bids. I was satisfied with that. We had one person ask if it had a picture of the Japanese pavilion, and it did, but it turned out they were looking for the Japanese tea house, which is a specific card. There were several of these 25 card series that you would get, and you could make a whole compendium of World's Fair. Really a great price. If you think about it, $36 is like $1.50 a card, and I usually get $3 a card just for stereo cards that are loose. But you also have to remember that the customer actually paid $8 in shipping, so to them it was a $44 or $45 transaction, and that's about what these sets seem to be going for as sets these days. This went from one viewer's house to another viewer's house. The person who got it was just thrilled because they're just not seeing a lot of Holt Howard. And the seller was thrilled because she still has a great collection, but she just didn't have a place for these. It's a very hard set to find. This is for the desk and den, as the tag says. And we have the wonderful little pencil caddy there. And there's the Holt Howard label. And then this guy who just wants to eat your pencil shavings really, really badly. That big beak. Very cute set. The fellow who got this was thrilled because he said he's not finding interesting Holt Howard in the wild. I can't say that I am either. I was very grateful to get this from a collection, and very happy for all concerned that it sold for $255. It really is hard to find this set. It went on 13 bids. It's very exciting to see the interest in the market in these pieces. This also did well. This went for $38. This is early American pattern glass from the 1890s back to the early 1800s, the origins of the glass industry in the United States. You would see these press patterns. They were heavier than later Depression glass, very well made. The green pieces were more popular in the 1880s and 90s. They started doing more color and less clear, and they painted them with gilding. And I had an interesting question from somebody during the listing. If you look here, notice how the top is painted all the way around the edge, but the bottom is not painted on the top edge. And they wanted to know if that made it a fake or a forgery. Well, there are a few of these patterns that have been reproduced. The creases pattern, which is very ornate, is the one I think of the most often. But Delaware, I do not know to have been reproduced, but what I do know is that sometimes if they were in a hurry and they could get away without doing extra work, like gilding the edge, and they thought it looked good, they just would skip it and they would send it out the way it looks. So it's funny, when you talk to decorators, we forget, we're thinking of it as art and painting, and you're sitting there and you're slowly painting this wonderful thing, and they're looking at it as, my job is to make as many of these as possible because that's how I make a living. So decoration is sometimes more slapdash than we think it is. So they're not always exactly the same. And that makes it kind of interesting for collectors. $38 on 19 bids. That was a very fine price to get for this. I kind of thought it would do well because it is a sugar bowl, but it does not have a slot for a spoon, which means you could use it for any number of different things. It doesn't have to be part of a sugar and creamer set to make sense. This went to a friend of mine out in Washington, and I'm very glad that she got it. She put it with a really fun-looking alien sticker. And it does have sort of an alien look, but it actually is a gas mask. This was a very serious thing in its time. This is Bundles for Britain. A New York society lady started the campaign to bundle all sorts of things, socks and make linens and all sorts of things for the support of the war over there before we were involved in World War II directly ourselves. And this is a hard one to find. You see the lion with the Union Jack all the time. That pin was very commonly sold by them, but this one cost as much as $2.50 at the time, and that was a lot of money for a little pin in 1940. And so not very many people bought it. Plus it's a little bit sinister. But very poignant. And so it went for $60 on 16 bids. Have not seen another one of these. This did very well too, and I was so pleased it went to a friend of ours that went for $220 on 25 bids. This is something that's not all that old. It was the end of last year's production at Shearwater Pottery. In fact, that's the 23 you see. But Shearwater can only be gotten in Mississippi, and this was the last one that there was available. There will not be any more made, and in fact, a friend of mine who saw the video I did from Shearwater Pottery went and bought a piece. She was traveling from Florida and went through Mississippi and said it was a wonderful tour, but they were really low on stock. She bought a really neat parrot, though. And I believe that because they were running low on stock when I was there. I will be curious to see what the 2024 production looks like if I get a chance to go back there. This went to a rare bookseller, which I found very interesting. So they apparently at $58.50 felt that this was either important enough, or the signature and the personalization meant something to them, or they just have a customer for this book and needed it. It went on 14 bids. The book's in great shape. The dust jacket, not so much. There's Alex Haley. This was the first really successful TV miniseries, and in fact, the last episode, I believe, is the third highest rated television show in history. And that was a big surprise. ABC invented the miniseries concept because they were afraid that if they didn't run the shows all together, that people would lose interest, or the fact that it was about Black Americans would make a very limited market, and it turned out they were absolutely wrong. People were really fascinated with it. And so it did well then, and it's doing well now. Wonderful piece here. This went to a family from Holland originally. This was very meaningful to them. This is the end of the war when the Allied troops are liberating Holland, and you see the bundles being dropped out of the airplanes. There were several others in this series that I could find, including the railroad strike. It all had to do with the Dutch resistance to the Nazis in the Second World War. I don't know how many are in this series. This one sold for $68 plus $11 shipping. It seems like they typically sell from $65 to $85. And if anyone else out there knows what the other pieces in this line are, I would love to find out. We had two other items, a mola and one other piece that also sold to these folks, but that was an error on the part of one of the people at home misunderstanding which item they wanted. They weren't super expensive items. It was an honest mistake. They offered to pay for all, and I said, no, look, you just pay for the one that you really wanted. The other two can come with me to shows and sell perfectly fine. So, sometimes you just have to look out for other people. Mistakes happen, and that sort of thing I don't mind. That's a lot different than somebody coming in with a very firm bid at the last minute and then not paying. I didn't make a ton of money on this because the shipping was so high. It sold for $32 and cost $33.70 to ship because it's a big mare shipping from Florida. And of course, that's going to make an impact. For those of you who are level 2 and 3 members, do check the community tab because we will have another listing round coming up very soon. You will be able to see in that one that I'm doing a lot of smaller items because I am in Florida and the shipping from Florida can be prohibitive. So, from the customer's standpoint, they paid $65 for this mirror, which I think is about what it's worth and is about 3 times what I paid for it. But the post office got half of it. So that's something to bear in mind when you're selling on eBay, depending on what part of the country you're in, especially because the shipping rates are set to go up again. Bo Milander, this was interesting because there wasn't a lot of information on this person, but I finally was able to track them down. I've seen these pieces since my childhood because Seattle has a large Scandinavian population, and they sold these pieces in the gift shops back when I was a kid. But this one, I just loved the vibrance of it. They were very popular in the 60s and 70s, but her real claim to fame is making little pixies. She came out with one in 1948 as a college student at a Danish art school. It won the competition, and she set up a factory, and she's now retired, but there are other people making them, and they've been part of their line since 1948. The paperweights came a little bit later, but were really vibrant, really fun, a big success. This one sold for $72 plus shipping, so around $80 total, and that's about what they typically seem to sell for. Occasionally, you'll see a really crazy pattern that will go for more. This was an experiment. I always liked these guys. I remember when they came out in this country in the late 70s, early 80s. This is Romer. It is a wood figure made of a nice maple in Italy. It is smoother and less chippy and detailed in the figure and the faces and the expressions than, say, Henri or Torri Art or the other Italian wood carving companies. But the Romer pieces go from a single person on a stand, usually representing a profession, to a person with props. And when you have more props and they're more complex, my theory was they should sell for more, and that's exactly what happened. So I paid $18.50 and it sold for $46. Because it has its pitchfork and its milk jug and the bucket, and none of it is broken or missing. And because of that, I figured that it would probably go, and it did. I just think these are interesting and something from the late 70s, early 80s to look for. People keep asking me, what should we be looking for from that time? Well, here's another example. The Fenton Holy Nativity set, I was a little concerned to list this after Christmas. I know it could have sold maybe a little higher if we'd gotten it out before Christmas, but we did sell the Shepherd's set. We had the Wise Men set. That one was kind of damaged, so this was the last of the 3 sets. Someone pointed out to me that these actually don't sell for as much as the other 2 sets because a lot of people bought the Holy Family and didn't buy the other completer pieces to make a full crush. So once I understood that a little more, I felt pretty comfortable with the $103 plus shipping. It's a very cute set, and it will grace somebody's home next year for Christmas. We sold the ship version of this a couple of months ago and got, I think, $4 less than we did for the airplanes. This is another one of these World War II restricted recognition manuals. So basically, only if you were in the service were you to have this, so that you could be up to date on what our aircraft and the enemy's aircraft looked like. There's a P-40 Warhawk. And very importantly in the back, it explains that it is restricted and it contains information that could affect our national defense, and it is not to be shared with anybody unauthorized under penalty of law. We only get to share it now because the war is long over and most of these airplanes are in museums. So it went for $52 on 12 bids, and I was pretty happy with that. So those were our successes and a little bit of eBay's failure, but overall very happy with the sales, very happy to be able to put things out where both our viewers and people in the big eBay universe get to see them and understand more about them. If you are not a level 2 or 3 member and you want early access to these videos, why please do go down below the dash line in the description of any video and you can find out more about memberships. We're very grateful for the extra support that allows us to make these extra videos, and that's why the level 2 and 3 members do get early access to this. So thank you all for watching, and we look forward to bringing you 20 new interesting items very soon. If you're a level 2 or 3 member, check that community tab for information about when that video is released.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.